Thank you so much, Sanjay. Thank you so much for the kind word and the introduction. It's great to be having this conversation on the World Fashion Day. It's an industry we're all part of and honored to be. Before I start the conversation, let me just quickly share the screen. Do let me know when we are able to.
Yes, we can see this. Yes.
All right. So good evening, friends. Hello to everybody who's attending. Thank you for taking time out. We'll spend the next 30-40 minutes having some conversation, interesting conversation around what we are seeing emerging in the fashion industry that might have precipitated in the last 1 or 2 years. I mean, this is not just generic trends in the industry. I think we'll take our time to just kind of observe what's happening in the industry, what are the opportunities, and what can it be in it for each one of us. So let's look at like a roundup on quick summaries before we delve into each one of them. There's a lot of fashions digital acceleration that is happening. On the counter side, there is a demand for sustainable and craftsman-led brands happening. There is a humongous growth that has happened in the pandemic on growth of athleisure. Technology brings us back on data-driven fashion, and the art and science meet there. The counterbalancing force bring back the regenerative fashion, and as some of us would like to put it, Desi is cool, so there is the whole India pride thing happening. Taking on to what happened in the last 1.5-2 years, and there's a meme that must have reached a lot of you, that all that our CTOs tried to teach us in the last 10 years happened in in 1 year. Everything happened. I have a business responsibility which makes me travel between Bangalore and Delhi very, very often, and I think a lot of time it was offered that we might use Zoom and Teams comfortably, but I guess it's the pandemic that taught us so much more comfortably to do meetings. And today we are having seminar, webinar, everything. To come back to the topic, the pandemic accelerated the digital adoption at the consumer side, at the brand side, and at the industry side by many years. And instead of going into the data charts or whatever, very simply put, if you just focus at what happened at the bottom, we've accelerated the adoption by 10 years in Asia Pacific. The examples are around, our parents learned to buy medicine online. People who were on the periphery of not wanting to buy grocery digitally had to move to buy grocery digitally, and now they're completely sold. So the base of consumer who adopted digital accelerated 8x, 9x, 10x in the last 12 to 18 months. Data says 43% of consumers who had never purchased online began doing so in 2020. So the base broadened. 28 to 30% consumers are now willing to say that for very large activity in our life, we'll probably not go back to the store. Now, of course, that poses question to how will the retail industry adapt to this whole new trend. But it has kind of forced businesses to, with agility, look at how can they participate in this new trend that is happening. Brands with less agility were forced out, and brands that adopted very, very quickly in Q1 of 2020, in April, May, and June, we saw 400x, jump in apps and websites coming up from brands who were probably pushing their digital acceleration further had to be now forced to be available online because all of us were at home, and the only way to access brands and businesses was digitally. So that's what happened and then it came and impacted the fashion industry also. We were all used to be doing trade shows, bookings, sample making, fashion shows, and everything suddenly came to a halt. We had to stop, pause, and relook at how do we step forward to continue doing business. And a lot happened in the last 18 months. Some quick ones. Big Things, which is a fashion tech company whose tech office is in Bangalore, they ventured into digital models and virtual photo shoots, enabling brands to shoot catalogs and organize virtual runway. I think the big move happened when the New York Fashion Week went completely digital, and they enabled it. And and then so many more fashion weeks through the world copied it and moved into the same model. Um, it suddenly opens up a completely new platform where a whole lot more people can log into the fashion show, which was earlier admitting only the elite few. And it was probably a giant leap for democratizing fashion and accessibility in a big manner. So something happened here. Closer home, if I go back 15 years, at a role where I was heading product and merchandising for one of our large brands at ABFRL, we had about 35 distributing partners. And in a spring summer trade show or in an autumn winter trade show, you had to create 35 set of samples of, let's say, 1,000 shirts each, for which you had to do minimum fabric ordering, which most companies wouldn't be willing to take for 100 meters. But you paid an upcharge, you created 35 sets, the sales team divided into 35 groups, traveled all across the country, did booking, and there were logistical nightmares. Today we have moved to, our designers are designing 80% of the line on Clothe software, which is creating complex designs, drape and flow, where now we are able to move to a virtual trade show where not just the distributors, but more than 10,000 retailers are able to log in at real time and are able to do their bookings, which changes the accessibility game completely and is able to give live learning to designers to course correct while they're designing, while they are making. And there is so much value add that happens because of that. Virtual try on, and I think Lenskart probably was one of the first larger companies that kind of took matching shapes of sunglasses to your faces, etc. And now we see it everywhere. Pepperfry doing it with furniture. Large sports footwear companies, you are able to now try your shoes sitting in your living room. In another very interesting category, which makes again so much simple and common sense, jewelry. Sitting at home and jewelry, different shapes, different faces. You have a square face, you have a long face, you have an oval face. What kind of jewelry? A choker, a long length necklace, what kind of earrings? It is so much more now simpler to be able to match the jewelry to your liking, to your attire, to your outfit, and then be able to make your decisions. So it takes so much more ambiguity and risk away from the decision making and makes it simpler for the consumer. So virtual try on, when you don't go to the store has decided to come to you. Your mobile phone is now the one-stop shop for being able to make so much more faster and easier decisions. Another complex thing, beyond that. So virtual try-ons are one thing, but one of the largest things that the industry has probably not able to solve fully. There's a lot of work that's been happening, but again, now we see a whole lot of acceleration happening with the advent of e-commerce. Um, Almost about $550 is riding on garments which are returned because fits were not right. Now, human beings do not come out of molds. We don't look like what we see on the screen, identical shape and size. And thank God for that. Thank God for the diversity. Thank God for keeping things interesting. But what it does it, because we come in so many shapes and sizes, it makes the whole piece very, very complex. Um, we are petite, we are regular, we are tall. In the same region, same age group, we will be lean and athletic, regular, curvy, large, and plus. I would like fitted clothes and somebody would like comfort clothing. Somebody prefers formal clothing and somebody prefers casual clothing, and patterns differ for each one of them. For the same size of M size dress, if you make it in a drapey fabric versus a stretch fabric versus a coarse count, the fabric will drape very, very differently, and hence same dress cut into different fabrics will not fit, in a same manner to the consumer. And then comes ratio. For example, if there are 50 men attending this session whose shirt size is 40, they all will have different waist sizes. So earlier, when you sold a size 40 suit, so many people will fit into the blazer, but the trouser wouldn't be fitting, and that forced us to unbundle the suit. So many women who would probably have the same waist size of 30 will have different hip sizes, which means the same L size kurta is fitting very, very differently to different people, and some people love the fit and some don't. And hence that creates a very, very complex algorithm to be able to do anthropometric studies and be able to standardize sizes. And the industry has been dealing with it in its own ways. One of the answers was no questions asked return, but that puts a large burden on the system. So there is a lot of work happening in that space. Some of the recent ones have been digitized body measurements. A couple of companies are working in this space of 3D mesh suits. Now, some of these things do look gimmicky to begin with. But remember, e-commerce in the beginning looked gimmicky. Mobile phones in the beginning looked gimmicky, but today they are normalized and they are a way of life. So some of these systems are now being developed, which will be able to digitize body measurement and eventually be able to shape up the industry's fit sizing to a level where we should be able to significantly reduce our returns because of fit issues. Um, so, so, so that's what we can see, that technology is playing a large role in resolving the pain points of the industry. At one side is technology. At the counter end, we see a whole lot of new, renewed demand of sustainable craftsmanship-led brands. Consumers, we've all, found the opportunity during the pandemic probably to look back and clean up our wardrobes and see what we had, and we also found clothes which we thought probably we shouldn't have bought. So we've kind of improved our lens, a lens on higher quality, lens on sustainable fabrics, lens on consumers asking questions on who made my clothes. I hope they are making it in fair conditions. So it's good that these conversations are happening. It's good that these conversations are forcing brands to take stock of what they are doing. There were always good brands who preemptively did the good things, and there are brands who are being forced into accountability, and hence these conversations are very, very important. um, for the longest, the artisan was the invisible face. These conversations are bringing the artisan at the forefront of the industry, and consumer is able to directly connect to see who are making their clothes, and are then able to value the whole piece so much more. There is a story behind the garment. It's just not yet another garment. So the whole approach on sustainability, the whole approach on being buying purposeful is increasing, and those conversations are going to make the whole industry far more responsible than what we are today. These are baby steps. I don't think we've gotten there, but at least the conversation, the meaningful conversations have started. If e-commerce has multiplied, so the conversation on plastic-free packaging has to increase, because otherwise we all see the amount of packaging that we open from our courier packets and dispose. It's important that that packaging is recyclable. It's important that when we are dyeing, our dyes are water saving. It's important that clothes where we use water, we are able to do that with less water. So these questions, these conversations are accelerating, and these are good conversations. These are conversations that will kind of redirect industry to ensure taking the right choices. Apart from the larger retailers everywhere, there is this whole ecosystem that is beginning to happen, and this does not cover all the brands. It's just a very small slice of brands who are keeping these conversations on top. Have all these brands gotten it right? No. All of us have a whole lot of learning to do. All of us are learning, unlearning, but we are open. We are hearing. We are on our feet to kind of see what the consumer is demanding. We are trying to make choices which are better for everybody. And that's a good thing, and that's a good conversation to have. Uh, Going back, so we keep flitting in trends between science and art, technology and sustainable. So going back to a lighter trend, uh, I don't know how many of you are attending this meeting from home. I think the emergence of the jogger and t-shirt in this pandemic has been a completely new thing. Athleisure was there even before pandemic, and it was like a one of those new fashion fads that was happening. But the pandemic accelerated it, I don't know how much, 100x, and our own brands have seen like 10x, 12x growth out there. I remember in the beginning of pandemic, we getting, those forwards where people said, get ready in the morning, dress up sharp so that you feel like you are at work, etc. But when we realized that work from home was here to stay, Soon the sharp shirt was replaced by the t-shirt and the jogger, and now we've gotten so comfortable with that thinking of going back to a denim or formal trousers looks like an alien idea. So that trend took over the industry, and the category, one of the categories that saw maximum growth during this period is athleisure, which kind of continues to take over the sports industry also. So while team sports and outdoor sports saw a dip, opportunities were found in home workouts, running, yoga. We all tried to find time while we were all attending more and more meetings to make ourselves active. And I think the kind of active clothing, the trend saw a positive benefit on those. We also saw, for example, in our business at Jaipur, our women consumer came back to us and said, nobody now wanted to wear silk chanderi kurtas and anarkalis with a lot of embroidery. Everybody was working working from home and working for home. So you needed to attend your office calls, and you also needed to do housework, and that gave rise to a keyboard to kitchen sort of kaftan, comfortable, looks good in a presentation and is comfortable to do housework. And as a category, loungewear again took off. So at one level was athleisure, the other level was activewear, and the third level was loungewear. I think these are the categories which benefited most during the pandemic, and are here to stay now. In the other categories, I think designers took a thing, and what they are doing now is calling it above the keyboard fashion. So there's a lot more focus on the A area of your garment, and a whole lot of activity, surface ornamentation, value add has moved. And we clearly see on our e-commerce catalog that the categories, the garments that have above the keyboard focus are selling far more than stuff which probably has hidden details or details on the back or details at the bottom. So it's a trend to keep in mind while you guys are designing your lines. Going back to data again. So if we look at, for especially for large national brands, predictive analytics has become a very, very important thing. How Indore shops is different than how Cochin shops, how Jammu shops is different than how Guwahati shops, how Bangalore shops is very different than how Delhi shops. And it's important to put all this science back into our creation. And there are tools and AI tools that are available. Traditionally, it has been the role of a buyer in the organization to be able to crunch large complex Excel sheets, but with the acceleration of consumer making their choices, it keeps getting more and more complex, and hence it's important that machine learning comes into this play, who is able to predict, because it better decision taken is what helps better inventory made, because that becomes the main point. The extra surplus inventory is what becomes the main point of the industry. So there are many AI solutions today available to allocate an order for merchandise basis what is selling and reallocate to ensure maximum sell-through. For example, at ABFRL, we use a tool called Symphony for all our replenishments across stores, and the machine is able to learn very quickly and adapt to different regional catchment and adjacencies, and accordingly allocate orders and generate predictive future orders of bestsellers. At the other hand, let's say not the larger brands, but for the smaller brands, the pitfall of bulk production are many. When you pre-make to sell, there will be seasonal fails, even if you are, the best buyer, and they build up over a period of time. So to counter this, a lot of conscious brands have started doing made to order business model, where the garment, is made only after the order is placed. Now, this is a little counter in an era where there is expectation of 24 hours and 48 hours delivery, next day delivery. But I think there is a growing fraternity of consumers who are willing to wait for goods made responsibly, goods made slowly, and goods made with love. At Jaipur also, we have about 50% of our line which is ready to ship, but another 50% of our line and our vendor partners line, we buy the fabric, but we do not make the garments. We make one garment, shoot it, we take the orders, and those orders are serviced from 12 days to 18 days to 23 days or to a month, depending on the complexity of the garment. It's heartening and surprising to see that there is a large and ever growing consumer fraternity who's willing to wait. That puts so much more lesser pressure on the system. That's good for the ecosystem, good for the earth, and you don't end up with inventory where you will wonder what to do with them in the end, burn them, scrap them, sell it to kabadi. So I think it's this is a model which is inventory light, and this is a model which is good for the system overall. So a good balance of predictive analytics and a good model of made to order is what can balance our inventory supply chains. Back to again the sustainable part, like I keep saying that the art and science keep playing off each other. The resurgence of regenerative part of the fashion, the circular part of the fashion. So there's a whole lot of conversation that's happening, and not just conversation, now there's action happening on this. Upcycle, recycle, downcycle, resell, thrift, swap, borrow, reuse, darn, rafu, dye, redye. In the last 2.5 years, the number of uh, companies that have thrived on reselling, renting, exchanging, swapping, and they are all growing fraternities. There is a growing base of consumers who are willing to relook at their garments, who are willing to reuse their garments, who are willing to contribute back to the supply chain without adding the pressure and the burden of new, which again balances out the whole cycle. For example, this kurta that you see on the picture is Jaipur's upcycle brocade kurta, which we buy from vintage sari sellers. There are these the buyers who bought saris in exchange of, it's an age old practices of women selling out their old saris. And then sometimes these saris go to scrap or landfill. We rebuy them instead of reordering a new fabric, and create lines and collections out of these and proudly sell them with the rafu work done on them. And there are consumers who are happy because that sari is a part of a story, that the rafu is a part of a pride badge that they carry, that instead of creating new from the system, we reused what was available. And that again is a part of the whole sustainable economy circular cycle. So many more brands are now seeking local. So many brands are looking to revive. So many brands are working in the space of preserving. Even in Western silhouettes, even in Western fashion, designers or brands are looking, very, very focused manner at local fabrics. If you look at the designs presented here, this is Gamcha handloom fabric, and jackets and capes are being created out of it, and these collections are a sellout. Tangalia craft, which is a 700 old and now diminishing craft. There are very, very few artisans in the country left who are now still practicing, but they're brands who are helping revive the craft, get more orders, educate the consumer about these crafts of our country. There is a renewed focus on all of this, which is what, again, when I'm saying baby steps to sustainability, all of these activities and activations and engagements are what are adding weight to the conversation and taking it in the right direction. And lastly, like I said, the good part of the Desi is cool, indie pride is what kind of seals the deal. It was touted, that the younger generation might outgrow the Indian traditions, and may lean towards Western culture. But actually, at the counterbalancing force, it's quite the opposite. New generation is finding ways of contemporizing and using our roots to stay proud of our origins. The most prominent example of this is the sari. Even if it is for the gram, even if it is for social, but there is so much more activation. There's so much many. If you go and search for sari champions, you will find so many younger consumers championing the sari. They figured out their way with pre-stitched saris. They figured out their way with ready-to-wear saris, but they're not shunning the sari. And hence the confidence and the fact that our traditions are here to stay. We can go back to our roots. We can launch brands out of our craft and heritage. There are newer brands coming out of Ayurveda. There is so much activity happening in skincare, which is happening, from the practices that our moms and grandmoms practiced, which is what gives the confidence to trends in the new fashion industry to say Desi and indie cool is here to say. The emergence of India on the global scenario is here to stay. And India being an inherently green country, I think the contribution that we will make to the entire chain is going to be immense. So leaving you with this happy picture of Isha Kutti, who did the famous hula hoop dance in a sari, and kind of convey to the world that indie and indie ethnic is cool and is here to stay, and we are here to make a statement. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Rashmi.
Questions?
Yeah, Rashmi, thank you so much for walking us through so much in a very crisp and focused manner. So stay safe and stay stylish and stay desi and indie cool. So thank you very much. So what I'll do is there are some questions that have come into the Q&A box. So I'm going to pick some of them and go through it. One question that's come up is from MV Gopinath, who asks that what is the future of handloom in all of these trends that you talked of? Are you seeing a resurgence in handloom? Are you seeing a mix of handloom and let's say non-handloom material? What's your take on that?
So, very good question, especially for the fact that, a large part of my business is around handlooms. I think the future is bright and the future is here to stay, but together, the brands, the industry, and the consumer needs to work a little harder towards it. I think in the last 2 decades, the whole trend driven on cheap and cheerful did take us away from handicraft. It did not die. It was always there. And there's a very large part of our country which proudly wears handloom. But yes, there were enough brands which were selling stuff under, 199 and 299 and 399, which kind of led to techniques which are probably not earth environment friendly. But that's not the conversation. The conversation here is around handloom. So the answer to that is that one, the handloom side of sector will have to also continue investing back into practices that makes handloom consumer right, contemporary. And when I say contemporary, I do not mean modern. I mean the right usage. So what might have been right for my grandmom 60, 70 years ago, we probably need to just repackage it to make it relevant to the modern woman, which is why, for example, I showed you the gamcha cape. Now here is a woman who travels and she wears it So we need to, one, start designing maybe a little more relevant to the consumer. Two, in the maintenance of the fabric is where I think we probably need to do a lot more work. We've done already a lot of work, but a lot more work around research and development to make the maintenance a little easier. For the consumer on the move, their impression is handlooms are difficult to maintain, which is probably not the right impression. But I think as an industry, we need to work harder to educate the consumer that with a little more, just a little more effort, not a lot more effort, handloom is far more beautiful, far more good for you and for the ecosystem. So I think it's going to be a combined effort of education, investment in upgrading the fabrics and upgrading, contemporizing our designs, but handlooms are here to stay. And I think actually the interest is regenerated, and pandemic has given a pro push to natural and local and handloom.
Excellent, because I think that also plays into the made to order kind of trend that you talked about, right?
Yes.
A question from Tanya Sudhakar, the question that I also wanted to ask. With all this movement towards sustainability and sustainable fashion, etc., how would you think of the role of pricing playing a role? Because there's an impression that sustainable products tend to be priced at a premium compared to the non-sustainable products. And therefore, how do consumers react? How would you think of pricing a sustainably designed fashion item?
I guess again, consumer and industry both has a role to play. So sustainability is a very, very large term that tries to cover a whole lot of things. I mean, if I just step back, one of the best quotes that I read on sustainability was that the most sustainable garment was the garment that was never made and never bought. Decided to be in the business, and once you are you are a fashion brand, you are a brand that's making beautiful clothes for people. Um, it's a two-way dialogue. I know I've heard this question on, why are sustainable clothing more expensive. I think the consumer themselves, including me, has to answer for that, because we moved away. We started buying so much of the cheap and cheerful. uh, Business works with economies of scale. When we reduced the size of that industry and there were fewer people tending to the same thing, the cost of making the same item could not be defrayed to a larger base. So it's a both-sided play. As the consumer will increase the consumption of what we call sustainable, or what people understand as organic, or what people understand as slow fashion, automatically the prices come down. Very simply put, if I was to move to another industry, organic food, the movement is still happening, and it's growing every day. But 4 5 years ago, buying organic arhar dal was probably 4x more expensive than buying your regular tur dal. But today, when I see at the supermarket shelf, the organic tur dal pricing is almost the same as what the regular tur dal, at max maybe 5%. So prices have come down because consumption has gone up. So I guess it's a both way responsibility. If the consumer makes more choices in the favor of sustainable, eventually sustainability, the cost of maintaining sustainability comes down. At the same time, at the industry responsibility also is to ensure to engineer the product in a manner that we do not convey the message to the consumer that craft is for the elite. Craft is for everybody. Craft has been there in our households all the time. Just because we branded it does not mean that the cost multiplier goes up. So like that's the answer.
Understood.
Industry to play to ensure that we engineer the product in a manner that we do not make it prohibitive, and the consumer has the role to play, that the more you will consume it, uh, the more cost effective it will become, and eventually it will become at par with anything else that you were consuming.
Got it. Good.
We have to make better choices.
Yep, true. Here's a question from Usha Bora. She's asking about the issues of transparency and accountability. For example, if you have a craft-based product, say a handloom-made scarf, which is woven by an artisan, but thereafter it is fringed, stitched, and there are more people who are part of the creation process. First question is, who would you say is the artisan? Because there are several people who have worked on that particular scarf. And then there's an allied question to that, because now there is a lot of movement around the world where people are asking questions about showing the wage that was paid to the artisan. How would you react to that, given that so many people have been actually part of the process, though the weaver handles only one part of it? Your reactions?
Very interesting. It makes you stop and think. So I think while they may be, it's like a movie. While there's one hero or one heroine, there is a lot of support cast. Now, movies have the advantage of having a credit roll at the end of the movie where you name out the music director and the fighting director and everybody. Maybe eventually, when this whole movement around who made my clothes grows even larger and larger, and it comes under compliance that you have to mention everybody who value added. And because maybe digitally these things are possible, it was impossible to probably write, if there were 17 people who value added that garment, to write the name on the packaging. It wasn't thought of that ways. But maybe in future we will see a place where brands will start writing the name of everybody who added value, from the designer to the weaver to the person who dyed to the person who transported or whatever. um, I'm wondering why not. Someday maybe it will. Compliances are coming in where you are supposed to be publishing your addresses, manufacturer. It is an ask for more accountability and more transparency. So tomorrow, even that is possible.
Got it. Okay.
We will comply. The other question, the first part of the question was who is
who's the real artisan? Second part is
so
about
there's a hero and there are supporting actors, and
that's
everybody.
right. And the display of wages, etc., because there's so many people involved, which
So
I suppose is similar to that. Yeah,
it's similar to that. I think more and more organizations are, being compliant is a big thing, and there are
right.
regulatory on that.
Right.
is a self-correcting act. There will be brands who will do greenwashing, but there are enough counter forces to balance. And like I said, there are enough conversations happening to keep people accountable.
Right.
And more regulatory norm works will ensure that people do not err on the wrong side.
Got it. And we have about 5 odd minutes or 6 minutes left. So very quickly, a question from Sonia Arora Manglani. She asks, what's your take on natural fibers, like banana and bamboo and stuff like that? Do you think they're going to pick up? Is there a future for them, or do you see them being mixed up with other yarns?
I guess market forces usually decide all this.
Okay.
The idea is to keep trying. So a whole lot of these innovations are happening from natural fiber, and where entrepreneurs and businesses are trying to evaluate what are the other regenerative resources that we can use to make, instead of the exhaustive resources from earth that we can use. So I think this movement is in that direction. Now, whether they will grow is going to be dependent on what we make out of it, how does the product perform, and market forces decide most of these things. So if we make a good product and eventually the product finds a place in my life, in the new digital connected world, amplification of a good product is far more possible and easier than it was earlier. So if any one of us make a good product today, it's far more easier to test and try and scale it up. Capital is available and consumer is available.
And technology is as well. So,
and technology is available.
Right. And talking about technology, question from Padmini Govind. Rashmi, thanks for the super session. She wants to know if there are any third-party data analytics tools to determine consumer trends that can be used by smaller brands.
Sure. So what she can do is she can write to me directly. You
Understand. I'll share your mail ID with her. Yes, I will do that.
And maybe I can help connect them to some of.
Wonderful. That will be very helpful. Great. Question now. I think time for 2 more questions. One from Deepthi Zalpori. She says, you talked about this situation where you create just one piece and shoot it so that it doesn't create pressure on your on your inventory. How is this possible, if at all, for a smaller business? Is it possible if I don't have my own manufacturing unit?
It's actually even more possible in a smaller setup. What I did not indicate was not having a manufacturing unit. For example, I have onboarded a lot of small vendor partners who actually operate out of this system. Some of them have captive manufacturing capacity between 5 machines to 10 machines, having a tailoring setup. Some of tie up, like you have cloud kitchens, now you have cloud factories where people are leasing out their, manufacturing capacities. So, I have a whole lot of women entrepreneurs actually on Jaipur who, with access to capital and a whole lot of good taste, create some very beautiful collections, make one piece. What they block their capital on is on fabric, but not on, because what they are not able to do is forecast that M mein bikega ki L mein bikega ya XL mein bikega. To your previous question, they don't have access to technology in a manner that large corporations can have. So what they do is they keep the fabric, they make one beautiful piece, or they create 5 different styles out of the same fabric, and then we publish it on our website. And depending on the anarkali gets more order, let's say, than the kaftan, then they will make more anarkali than the kaftan.
Understand. Got it. So that's
so perhaps you have some access to manufacturing, either your own small setup, or there are these combined aggregators who are able to give you their manufacturing capacity. But if you have access to good taste, which the manufacturer is not getting, and access to some capital, anybody today can start their own label. That's the beauty. The entry barriers have really gone down.
And that's one of the advantages of being part of a large platform like Jaipur also, I would imagine, with access, right? That you provide.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. The last 2 questions. There's a question coming in from Lisa Mohanty from Nirguna. What's the best way to market revival weaves? Is it trying to revive a century-old lost weave from Odisha called Dhalapathara? and how does one bring it to a global audience? If you
Get
want,
in touch with us.
yes, okay. So I will have her write to you. And question from Milind.
I mean, jokes apart, there was a slide in the presentation which actually showcased many more brands. So
I saw that. Yeah.
Having my own brand. The beauty of the craft ecosystem is that we are very, very collaborative. You can approach any of the brands.
I understand.
So there are multiple portals available today where we are all working together to take traditional crafts globally.
Right.
I would be happy to help.
Excellent. Okay. Question from Milind Prasad, who says, would appreciate your view on how does the supply chain evolve in the context of economies of scale for sustainable products? Do you see that happening? Is it happening very fast? Is it something that is kind of slow to take off?
I wouldn't say it's happening very fast, but it is also not happening very slow. The consumption, like we said, in the previous part of our conversation, that because there is renewed interest in consuming local, the base is moving now month on month. We are not waiting for years for the base to change.
Right.
That's multiplying fairly fast, and hence the manufacturing base, the MOQs, everything is moving up fairly rapidly.
Okay. Last question from Tara Aslam. The question is, what's the pricing strategy to adopt for the sustainable segment for online sales? Because in offline, one can do a touch and feel and explain the whole fabric and the garment better. But in an online situation where attention span and time is limited, how does one communicate this?
I think the consumer, the last 1 decade has been spent teaching the consumer how to shop online. So the consumer is very, very savvy today. They find out what they want to find out. You need to pay attention to enrich. So I think online selling visual photography is a key tool. A basic investment into either a high-end phone or a good camera, so that you are able to showcase the detail of your product. The consumer now knows how to go to view 2, view 3, view 4, front view, back view, zoom in, zoom out. But if you've not given any details, then they will lose interest. The idea is to be able to provide what's so delightful about your product and be able to showcase it upfront. The consumer will find a way to find you. You ensure that the attribute, and when consumer is searching, so when they are searching for a particular weave from Orissa, you have tagged all these attributes to your, so that they come up in search.
Right. So you need to do your own homework as well.
A basic quick education for yourself in your products, right? For some of the small entrepreneurs, I think the small digital education as to how you will come up above in the search is going to be the first booster of your sales, and then keep it an iterative learning process.
Got it. Wonderful. So that brings us to the end of this session, Rashmi. We've taken an additional 4 minutes, but I think all for very, very good causes, no doubt. Thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely wonderful, you sharing all your experiences and insights. There's a lot of more questions that are coming in. What we will do is, we will collate these questions and send them to you, and so that you can respond to them.
And happy to help and happy to answer any.
Wonderful. And is it okay if we just share your mail ID with people so they can write to you? Wonderful.
Yeah,
great.
Absolutely.
So great. That's really nice. Thank you again so much. Thank you all participants for a most wonderful session, for your involved participation as well. So thank you all very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.